Welcome to the Popish Plot. I'm Nate.
I'm Jessica.
And I'm Mike.
Today, we're here to talk about the vision of the apparition of Our Lady at La Salette.
Yes. And also, why it's always a good idea for when the church moves slow, not to complain about it, because there's reasons for that.
Mm-hmm. So where do we start with La Salette?
Well, first we should point out...
In the beginning?
It's a very good place to start.
We're not doing Dormammu. We should first point out the fact that no Catholic is required to believe any vision.
That's the great thing about private revelation. Mm-hmm. Public revelation was closed a long time ago with the death of the last apostle, traditionally believed to be John, and contrary to what some of our Mormon brothers and sisters believe, he's not still walking around the earth.
Yes. However, anything that is approved by the bishops, and usually then Vatican goes and says, we agree with them, they will not have anything that's contrary to the faith in the actual vision itself. Mm-hmm. And it will be something where they try determining if there's some natural explanation for things, Seeing a person, there's limited natural explanations, but quite often, something's, bleeding or crying, and it's, a water main break, and they're like, nope, totally natural.
It gets much the same treatment as we've discussed before with regards to miracles. Mm-hmm. The church does not want to put anything too definitive on these things until they've really gone and given an opportunity for things to be weighed out and make sure that this is, in fact, of supernatural origin as opposed to a purely natural origin.
Yes, so I want to say now, this was approved. There's nothing in the official vision that goes contrary or, even questionable about the faith.
That
right. Said, there's a lot about La Salette that should give anyone of goodwill pause.
I mean, I personally only knew that it was Our Lady of Elfin Warrior helmet because she had this crown that there were spikes and flowers, and it was awesome.
It's pretty impressive. So, La Salette is a place in France, and there was France, and there was an apparition on the 19th of September, so we're coming up on it when we filmed this, in the year of our Lord, 1846. So, this is a time of great change. France is currently under its second-to-last king. Very shortly, there's going to be the revolutions of 1848 that will roil all of Europe. We're about a decade before Lourdes. There's a lot of stuff in the air right at this point.
Yes, and the vision was seen by two people who were taking care of cows. So like shepherds, but with cows.
Cowherds.
Yeah,
yes.
Cowherders. Mm-hmm. And they were both teenagers.
The two children were Maximin Giraud and Mélanie Calvat.
Very well.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes, and they had a single vision of a crying, beautiful woman.
With an elven crown.
With an elven crown. That's the most important part.
It's the most important bit. If you don't take that away from this, we've failed you.
I mean, even when...
I don't think that's the most important bit.
It is. Even when the Pope went and did the official thing, they used a Russian crown versus the normal crown they used because that's the closest they could get to an elven crown.
Sure.
And she was crying, and then she told them in both French and then in their native dialect, because it was back in the time when everyone kind of had a variation thereof.
So everybody spoke French, but not everybody spoke the same French.
Mm-hmm. Yes. To keep holy the Lord's Day, stop using the Lord's name in vain, and that there's a possibility that there would be crop failures of things like potatoes and grapes and other crops if people did not change their way, which is part of the reason why it was important that she said French and then their local dialect, because she said pomme de terre, and that's
a potato.
Yeah, and the girl did not know that meant potato.
Potato.
She thought it was some sort of apple, because essentially it's
a ground apple.
Ground apple, yeah, earth apple.
And,
earth apple.
And then they were each told what is referred to as a secret. There was something, for each one individually.
Yeah, just for you. Mm-hmm. Well, so far, all of this sounds pretty reasonable.
It does.
Keep holy the Lord's Day. Don't use the Lord's name in vain. Again, the Ten Commandments is not a lengthy list, and these made the list.
Yes.
And they didn't just make the list, they made the more exclusive first part of the list.
And then a warning about bad things that could happen, which is quite common in visions, which is why the local bishop approved it, same date in 1851.
And if that was the end of the story of La Salette, we would
Everything would be fantastic, and we'd all be celebrating the feast of Our Lady of La Salette.
We talk about how she foresaw the potato famine and whatnot.
and how apparently a potato, kind of is like a ground apple.
Now, here's the problem, though.
That's
not where the story ends. No.
Nope. Dang it.
Nope. A couple years after their vision, the local bishops had them send the Pope what the secrets were, which is quite common. You hear it in, Fatima had it.
Fatima had it. It was in a book, and it was all sealed away. And
if you've got an apparition, eventually you're going to have to kick it up the chain to Rome.
and it gets written down privately on a piece of paper, sealed inside of an envelope, and that envelope gets delivered to the Pope or one of his undersecretaries, and from there it gets sealed away, usually until some later date
When they need it.
when they need to review it.
Max's was very short, like maybe a page. Melanie's was like a 3-page, handwritten by someone who was not all that, literate, so it probably wasn't the smallest print possible.
Giant letters like Paul. I'm Paul. I wrote this with my own hand. Yeah. So, we have the revelations on the day, and then we have these secrets that go to the Vatican. Again, so far so good.
Yep. The only issue was,
Oh no.
well, Max never shared his visions.
Well, sure, because it was a revelation to him.
However, he did do something that we would totally do if we had a vision, but, usually super religious people would not do.
Again, this is why we're not given
This
visions.
is why they don't give us visions.
Of whenever anyone asked, he came up with crazy ideas. He's like, I'm going to be a millionaire. Our Lady said, I'm the next king of France. Stuff that no one believes.
See, people should keep these things simpler. Like, what was the secret? The Lord said that you should show hospitality by buying my drinks.
Hey!
That would be a good one because he also led a life after his vision, unlike a lot of visionaries. He wanted to be a priest, but he wasn't good enough at school for it. He probably had some learning disabilities. So then he became a soldier, and from what I could tell, he was an okay soldier, but he ended up getting a lot of debts. So then he worked with someone else to sell liquor, who then took advantage of his fame for being a visionary for selling it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Come by Miracle Max's Liquor.
Exactly. And eventually he died young in 1875.
That's unfortunate.
Our Lady, I got the fake one. Our Lady told me that one day I would meet a future saint who was destined for greatness and riches, who would be a pinnacle of generosity, and would buy me food and drink for a night. Maybe you're him.
This is why we're not going to receive an apparition of Our Lady.
Well, I'm working on ensuring that. I mean, these things bring nothing but trouble to people. I mean,
So that was the relatively short, unhappy life of Maximin.
yes.
Yes.
But that surely can't be enough to make people just a little wary of La Salette.
Well, yeah, but Melanie's life is a little more checkered and storied.
Yes.
Dang it.
She became a religious sister, which is
Hey!
normal for visionaries.
Yeah, that's pretty solid.
However, she had issues with how she was kind of famous. She made a lot more prophecies and then tried tying it back to the one vision she had that was like a 10-minute vision. This was a single thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't ongoing.
Yeah.
She also was big on different conspiracy theories and politics of the day.
Well, in fairness, in the France of her day, there were a number of legit conspiracies.
Yeah, like,
But yeah.
totally understandable,
Yeah.
but,
No, that's no good.
always going on about, secret groups that are in charge of everything.
Wasn't there
and
also
stuff.
something about a book? She wrote a book.
She wrote a book of her, secret after her original secret was 3 pages.
No. Here's the thing. She was given a singular apparition of Our Lady. And that's a great and glorious thing. And then when asked by the competent authorities to write her vision down, it only took a few pages.
And it was probably relatively large, as we said, written by somebody who did not appear to be particularly well literate, so it was probably large characters. It probably, one of us could probably put it to a page and a half.
I'm notorious for my tiny little writing.
You are.
Yes.
You could probably get it down to like 3/4 of a page.
The book was written 33 years later.
Way later. And memory is memory is a cruel mistress.
And again, it was influenced by all her, political things, her trying to put other things in.
I am the great
theories.
visionary, so whatever I think is probably right.
Yes.
It ended up on the forbidden book list of the Vatican.
See, we need to bring back the Index, only because it's cool.
It is.
It is.
Although, I think we need to take... I like the idea of bringing back the Index, but I think we need to take some of the strictures against books on the Index and just dial them back a little bit.
Sure.
Let's take away the pain, the penalty of moral sin for reading these books.
Well, just to tell people, listen, reading this is a very bad idea that will almost certainly draw you farther away from Christ instead of drawing you closer to him.
Huh?
Yes. But anyway.
Done and done.
Yeah.
Along with writing that book, she changed religious orders at least 5 times. Like, even the nuns that are based off of her vision are kind of vague on that. And she changed houses within the orders as well. So it's probably like a dozen different changes for the life of a, religious sister, which is not normal.
And that's
No, I mean,
there's usually a certain amount of constancy that goes with their lives. Stability.
Stability, yeah.
And by the time of her death, she wasn't living in any religious order. She was in Italy, and people just knew her as that old lady who, was always in church. So at least she still had
The old crazy
least
church.
there's that.
The old crazy church lady.
There shouldn't be any shortage of old ladies in early.
It was 1904.
So early 20th century Italy, I'd imagine there's quite a number of old church ladies.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Again, 1904. So that's 58 years after the original apparition.
And so why there was some talk at the beginning of it, neither one has been declared blessed, much less saint, because of all the stuff.
Sure.
Well, and in fairness to them, provided that they were possibly that they are possibly in heaven right now, a big part of becoming a saint or a blessed or a saint does require getting those other people that are with the personal devotion to the said saint. If your reputation has been significantly tarnished, it's kind of hard to get one of those.
And not only that, but when if there is a cause even opened, then they want to examine everything you've ever written.
Right,
and so if you wrote a super salacious, just
book,
full of your own nonsense
book that the Catholic Church
help.
says we are not going to touch that one.
Yeah,
with a 10-foot
if you've
pole.
written a book that's been placed on the Index, that's a strike against you.
Which, it's somewhat ironic it was placed on the Index, because the only reason why we hear about it is those people who think they're Catholic, but, the current Pope is not the real Pope.
Yeah.
And stuff, who follow things from her book, because she said things like, Rome will lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. So... they're like, oh, see, this proves that we're right.
The sedevacantists.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, they don't pay attention to other lines, like the Antichrist will be born in around 1865, and him and his brothers will head armies in their, when they're 12 and become leaders of armies.
Well, again, if you are in behavior a Protestant, you're protesting against the church, and yet consider yourself the only genuine Catholic, that's going to require a good deal of cherry picking of facts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but again, this is the later book, so it's like their own prophecies. The only issue with them, they largely follow the whole repent, stop doing evil. If you continue doing evil, these bad things will happen. Bad things will happen in the church, but then good things will happen. Mm-hmm. But the problem is they put dates to things.
See. One day we'll do an episode on Miller and Millerism, because that's just great. But just don't date anything. Don't let anybody nail you down, because then you can be proven wrong.
Well, yeah,
and vague.
And as somebody who's studied lots of the end times prophecies, every single time somebody goes and puts a date onto something like that, it fails. You look at Nostradamus, and half the reason he did so good was because he was always vague.
He could fit anything.
He was always vague about when it was going to happen and what exactly was going to happen. So, well, this is kind of like that. And he said it'd be in the future, but not far into the future. So, I mean, it's only been 30 years, right? I think this fits.
If you can plausibly say, oh, no, I know you thought it was this time, but it's probably this other time over here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And there is the issue.
Again, this goes back to Ghostbusters, too. The guy who predicts the end of the world before he even has a chance to have his book come out in paperback.
That's just bad planning.
Exactly. Even Peter Venkman recognized this.
And it is something where visionaries see things a bit in their own understanding. So there's a certain amount of, if things don't happen exactly the way, like the third secret of Fatima, the Pope was not shot with an arrow because we now use guns. Yeah. But when you name exact times, it makes it a bit harder, because even if it was their imprinting on it, you can't do symbolism with time. Well, so it's not this is explaining in words you understand.
Well, and that goes back to sort of like the human nature, in that we always record our experiences through our own lens, if you will.
And and here we come to another critical distinction between public and private revelation. Public revelation is guarded by the Holy Spirit and is inerrant. It cannot be incorrect. Private revelation goes to the interpretation of the visionary. So depending on whether or not they continue to live a good and holy life, that vision and their interpretation of it will be influenced by either their holiness or their lack of same.
Exactly.
Or, it's quite possible that there were various mental issues and stuff involved as well. I mean, the original one was written down years later, but even in the original ones, you read Max's and you're like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a vision of Mary.
Right. So
you read Melody's and you're like, yeah, I can totally see how she ended up believing all the conspiracy theories.
We saw a beautiful lady. We never said that this lady was the Blessed Virgin, but we always said that it was a beautiful lady. I do not know if it is the Blessed Virgin or another person. As for me, I believe today that it is the Blessed Virgin. Here is what the lady said to me. If my people continue, what I will say to you will arrive earlier. If it changes a little, it may be later.
I do love the conditional nature of so much revelation. We can delay these things.
Well, this thing is gonna, like with wars and stuff. This thing's gonna happen, but if we all do this, it might not happen at the same time as it would if we don't. Which is really a just like a truism about our world. And
that accurately reflects so much of the public revelation in the Old Testament.
Yes.
If my people turn from their ways, then these terrible things won't happen to them. Predictably, they didn't, and so they do.
Yes. I mean, the majority of the secret, original revelation is something where if the bishops had, cautiously said, I don't see anything wrong, and then slowly built up to that until at the point where they're old, or, after they passed, it might have affected the visionaries' lives in their writings such that it's not colored by all this extra stuff afterwards.
They might have, if they were not an instant celebrity within 5 years of this thing happening, they might have lived their lives a little more, shall we say, mellow.
And it could be that it was simply the stress of that celebrity that drove them a little off the beaten path,
or the temptations of the world that celebrity can tend to bring around.
But in any case, the important thing is elfin warrior crown.
Boom.
Yep.
Because no matter what happened to their lives afterwards, it still, was deemed worthy of belief, so you don't have to follow it, because you don't have to follow any of them.
And if the church wants
you totally can make art with super awesome crowns.
Again, keep holy the Sabbath? Okay, we all need to do better at that.
Yep.
Not use the Lord's name in vain?
We all need to do better at that.
Earth apples? All to the good. So the thing that we focus on? Elven warrior princess crown.
And if you look at the way the church is handling a thing and feel that maybe it's moving a little too slowly, maybe the church has a really good reason for why they don't want to rush into things.
Because they really rushed in and went, ooh.
Because rushing in...
That was a lot for those people.
it still would have been, in all likelihood, regardless of when they approved it, it still would have become an approved apparition. But...
Because it legit happened.
But at the same time, if they'd waited, the way in which everything else unfolded around it, it might have been a little different. Might have been a little more clean cut.
Wait and see is very rarely the wrong action.
So anyways, go down below. Make sure to, think about hitting that like button. Hit the subscribe. And so you get just so you get notified when the next episode comes out, hit that bell right next to it. Mm-hmm. And while you're down there, go down in the comments and
comment with how, if you were a visionary, what stupid things you would say your vision was to get people to stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Or your favorite obscure yet still approved apparition.
There's a few of those.
Bowrang.
There's quite a few of them.
Yeah.
With so many of them are in French-speaking countries, so they're incredibly difficult to pronounce.
Yeah.
And until next time, remember to live your faith.
Love your faith.
Share that love.
French. It's a language.
Well,
It's a language.
again, the French today call their Air Force the Army of the Air. So, they